Hello, Ilaria. We're so honored to welcome you on Kev-On Air. I've known Ilaria a number of years, and you're a hugely successful woman with many hats. Also, congratulations on being a mother recently. The first topic I want to ask is, tell us a bit about your role as the group advisor to the tech and social impact for Grab. And can you explain to some of our viewers about Grab's history and its achievements?
Yeah, well, first of all, an honor to be here. Always just such a privilege to tell the stories of Asian founders and Asian businesses. So Grab actually was founded 11 years ago by Anthony and Hui-Ling Tan when they were Harvard Business School classmates. And they took a class at that time called Business at the Base of the Pyramid. And that really ignited their passion to really bring social impact to Southeast Asia, which is where they're from. They're both from Malaysia. And at that time, actually, Malaysia's taxi situation is extremely dangerous. If you're a woman and you're taking a taxi at night, you should actually be calling someone and be on the phone with them 24 hours the whole time, just to be a human GPS to track where you are, because there's a lot of crime there. So that's what inspired them to bring the Uber model, which was still nascent at that time, from the US and from the West to Malaysia. And that's how it started the company. And now today, Grab went public in 2021 in NASDAQ in the largest SPAC deal ever to be seen. And Grab is the super app in Southeast Asia. It spans mobility, which is the Uber function where you can do ride-hailing transportation, but it's also in fintech and in delivery. So fintech also now, they have alongside with their partners, have one digital bank licenses in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So they're starting a whole digital bank revolution with their partners in that region to bring financial inclusion to people who are unbanked or underbanked, who have no bank accounts, who store cash under their beds. And deliveries is, it would be food and also grocery delivery to help micro merchants to also bring their products to market. So I would say that journey started without me. I joined Grab in 2018, but I was with their corporate finance team and later on became an advisor to their public affairs and also was in the founding team of the current think tank called Tech for Good Institute. And I'm the chairwoman. And we are really looking at the mission of bringing together the public and private sectors in Southeast Asia and the 8 countries that Grab operates in, where, much commerce is happening. Tech is changing the landscape because many people are leapfrogging and jumping over the PC and landline era and going straight to mobile to do their banking, their wealth management, their lending. People are getting credit and loans for the very first time. The middle class is just growing in a region with 680 million people, with 3/5 of the population under 30 years old. You can imagine how productive and the future of that region, but a lot of work needs to be done. And I'm very honored to be part of that journey. So I've been with them since 2018.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's such a huge portfolio of what Grab does and also with your NGO. How do you see, together with, I think, your NGO and also Grab, like in the next few years, what do you see tech and social impact through these platforms? What do you guys hope to achieve in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, there's the Grab part and there's the Tech for Good part. But I will say maybe from a very macro view, Grab is a social impact oriented business that's definitely a for-profit business. What they want to see though is economic empowerment for the people there. And when you can bring digital solutions and digital transformation, what is tech anyway? It's supposed to be, and it's pretty neutral actually. But if you use it for good and use it for business, then has a purpose. Then what you can do is actually create efficient solutions. You can bridge gaps. You can eliminate middlemen. You can lower the costs. You can deflate a lot of the costs. You can give the voiceless a voice on the platform. A nameless small merchant from a random Kalimantan island in Indonesia can sell his goods or her goods on the platform now and have a steady stream of income. Before the tech era, it was not possible. So digital inclusion can enable economic empowerment and financial inclusion so that people can now invest their money and grow their income. A privilege that you and I get to have living in an advanced city like Hong Kong. Now we can bring it to the developing Asia. So I think Tech for Good Institute is a convening platform. So we want all the people who are players in this ecosystem, whether it's private sector, public sector, academia, anyone who has the business of using tech to nation build, we want to bring them together. We want to convene them, and so that we can make policies together, make this business decisions together, educate each other on sticky areas, for example, gig economy, data privacy, fraud, so that we can all work out the kinks together. And that's really the mission of Tech for Good Institute.
It's phenomenal. In terms of Tech for Good in the Asia region, what are some of the key initiatives or the key mission for Tech for Good?
Yeah, so as mentioned, I think really bringing together important stakeholders to have meaningful and intentional dialogues so that you can solve problems together. And I mean, we all understand the power of networks and purpose-driven storytelling, understanding each other. So that's why conferences are in full gear right now after COVID, is because we need human interactions to understand what each other's doing. And everything at the end of the day is about human beings. So you need to convince human beings with human beings in order to get anything meaningful done and in order for understanding to happen. So I'll give an example. I think if you look at financial inclusion in Southeast Asia or anywhere in the world, even in Hong Kong, when Filipino mates are targeted by loan sharks, you actually have to have an infrastructure where you can say a bank sees a person as someone who's credible to give a loan. And once you give them that loan at a rate, an interest rate that is affordable, you give them a lifeline to multiply their income by doing more business, creating businesses. You've done that before. How can you not survive? How can anyone survive without a loan market that's credible to give you? But the most important thing is, do I see you as a credit-worthy person? Most Filipino domestic helpers, micro-entrepreneurs, farmers in developing Asia, they don't have a credit footprint, so they can never have loans to upgrade their lives. So one of the greatest advancement in this area is to use a credit proxy. So in our app, a driver who signs up to be a driver, we know that how much he earns each week. He gets paid on time. He has a whole history that could serve as a credit proxy for us to say this is someone worthy of getting a loan because we can trust his income stream. Then this person can then start a different life.
I think, you know, for such a noble and high-arching mission, I guess I have a question, which is that traditionally companies are very profit-driven. And yet we're, you know, with Grab and Tech for Good, we're really talking about companies, still they need to be commercially viable, but having that bigger social, economic mission to help people. How do we, you know, in your experience and also with Tech for Good, how do we, as you know, as you engage with governments or private and public stakeholders, what are some of those key ingredients, or would you say there's a key city or country that you feel that is able to do this really well? And what were the key ingredients for that success?
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, one of Grab's co-founders, Hui Tan, talked about this overlapping Venn diagram. You have business, you have social impact, they can overlap, and there's this area. It's not a huge area, but there is an overlap. I think if you are a creative business owner, decision maker who also wants to make social impact, you have to be creative in finding that overlap. And you want to maximize opportunities there. You want to find even new ways to create businesses that are viable. You have to have a good bottom line and path to profitability strategy, but at the same time, you are actually helping people. And you know when to have the wisdom to leave something on the table for someone else instead of taking it all for yourself, which I think a lot of corporates get bad names for mistreating people who work for them, mistreating their employees, mistreating workers that are low on the food chain. Those are very important issues in creating a viable business to serve all the stakeholders as well as your shareholders, but you're creating a business that leaves something on the table for everyone, right? I do believe if you have a good business model that is targeting growth and you are solving a problem. So for example, the idea of Uber, think about it, right? You're matching demand and supply. When someone needs a car, I mean, Hong Kong has a lot of taxis and great public transportation, so it may be an anomaly, but even then, I believe Uber has value add here. But when you're in cities that do not have good public transportation, where it is not safe to stand on the street to wait for a cab. For example, I used to live in New York City, and in the middle of winter, it is snowing. The snow is up to here, and I'm standing there waiting for half an hour. There's no car. I need a car, and an app can help match demand and supply and allow that convenience for people. But in a bigger way, I think you can allow people to make money in ways that are not traditional and they're not able to. So those are all ways that these new businesses are creating, meeting a need, but at the same time making money because you're willing to pay for a service. But I think at the end of the day, it must be thought through. The price point, the stakeholders involved, how are you rewarding the stakeholders, and also what kind of a problem are you solving? Are you indulging an impulse that is unhealthy? There's a lot of child pornography and illegal things that are being done on the internet that is scaled up and blown into disproportion. So that's why youth mental health problem is a big deal. And for some of my humanitarian work, trafficking has been majorly catapulted by technology. So we don't want that. But in areas that we can create opportunities for employment, money making, safety, right? There are apps now that tell you, hey, you're in the area where there's natural disasters or human crime movement. These things can have real-time alert that could save lives, real-time tracking, the list goes on. So I think we look at entrepreneurs and we ask them, are they trying to indulge an impulse in order to make money off of their weakness, or are they trying to solve a real life problem that people do not have solution yet, but yet you have the solution and you want to help people have that convenience while making it a viable business model so you can make money?
Yeah, no, that's very inspiring, because recently I think I've been sitting on a few government committees where we're trying to really encourage entrepreneurship, and we have different funds that have just been newly established. I guess, in Hong Kong and also in Greater Bay, there's a lot of new initiatives for innovation, for entrepreneurs, be it for social entrepreneurship as well. And in Hong Kong, we have the SIEDF fund. We just started a youth fund for young entrepreneurs to start their businesses that could be tech related in Greater Bay. In all these sort of new initiatives in Hong Kong and also in Greater Bay, would there be certain things that you would see that we should be doing more of to foster this idea of entrepreneurs having that care, or rather that wanting to do that social impact, as we're trying to balance this, innovation and entrepreneurship's landscape in Hong Kong and in Greater Bay?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big problem, Kevin, and it's hard to solve it with one solution. But I will say, at the end of the day, everyone cares about their livelihood. They care about the standard of living, and they care about fulfillment now. Our generation, we're lucky to think about fulfillment with our careers. Can policymakers or business owners create programs that allow people to go beyond thinking about surviving and think about thriving? For example, unaffordable housing costs. Is there a real solution, whether it's through subsidies, whether it's through incentive programs, whether it's through building a whole new set of housing just for helping talents that are trying to survive in the city, to settle basic needs, right? We talk about women and childcare. If we didn't have funds, my family would not be able to afford nannies right now in the US to help my husband take care of my 1-year-old while I'm here doing this wonderful interview with you. So unaffordable childcare is a big problem that holds back women from the marketplace. And even though I know Hong Kong and Singapore, we are lucky to be able to have a relatively more affordable domestic helpers, it depends on your income. It is still very expensive for people who can barely make it work. So how do you identify talent and give them something to start? Give them an affordable livelihood and a good life, a relatively good life, as they explore their talent and grow their talent into something that can contribute to Hong Kong, Greater Bay Area, and create innovations. I mean, I think we all need to start with a human point rather than an industry and business point, because at the end of the day, people want to make money in their job so that they could have a good retirement or second half of life. But people, millennials and Gen Z, are increasingly not buying into that, and they want the good life now as they create good careers. So I think creatively satisfying those needs is something that policymakers need to think about when you think about attracting the right talent to grow such an ambitious area and such an ambitious future for the area. I think I see that well in where I came from, which is where when I went to Stanford for university, most of my classmates did not come from any families with any money. So they had financial aid all the way to university and all their expenses paid for. That's how they had a Stanford education. And after the Stanford education, because of their credentials and what they're able to do, they can then have credit to buy affordable housing in the area so they can live there and start a family while continuing to build their career. I think that's one of the great things that the States or maybe Europe, they're able to figure out is there is an economy where loans are extended to people with potential and financial aid is also given to people who are in need abundantly. So that's why many people with no means, they have very quick upward mobility.
I think, for our viewers, I just want to, I've known Ilaria a number of years, and I think, being somebody who was raised in Hong Kong, went to a very prestigious local school, and then to be at Stanford, and then to have worked at Goldman Sachs and different international firms. What are some things that you see for Hong Kong youth as opportunities or things that you would advise them to capture based on your own experience, to be doing or looking into? For example, we have a lot of Hong Kong youth in high school or university. Like, what are some pearls of wisdom that you could offer them?
Gosh, I truly don't feel qualified because I think I am a product of just winning the sperm lottery, as Warren Buffett would say it, right? Like if you're born into certain families that give you certain opportunities and you're at the right place at the right time, then you can go to schools like, DGS and Stanford, which I was very fortunate to be able to go to. But I think I worked hard, but I think many people worked way harder than me and definitely were way smarter than me, but yet they were not being given the same opportunities. There is something sad about it, but there's also something empowering today, knowing that the digital revolution, the movement around the world for empowerment of minorities, of women, of people who do not have opportunities, and the ways, much more creative ways these days for more people to be involved in the economy, that is very optimistic. So first thing I would tell Hong Kong youth is that I know it's difficult to live in an expensive city that is so competitive, and I know that our merging with China also increases the talent pool. So things are very intense. The talents are of very high quality. I would say do not be disheartened by competition, but yet know why you are there. So know what makes you a diamond in the rough, makes you not a dime in a dozen. Basically comes down to what is unique about you. We all have something original about us, and we should actually develop that. I think in Asian culture, we're learned to be compliant and obedient, which are wonderful as well. But if we're too compliant and too obedient, sometimes we forget what makes us tick, what is our individual passion, what are something very quirky and weird about us that actually can make us very successful, like the Elon Musk and the Taylor Swifts of the world. They all have something a little weird about them, but it's the talent and it's the unique passion. And if you pursue it, then you become very unique. Nobody will be like you, and you'll be able to produce products, services, relationships that nobody else can replicate. And this is the same question people ask me, Ilaria, like generative AI is taking over the world. My jobs are getting taken away. What's going to happen? And I said, that's partially true. Everything in this world is made for human beings. And if you have something human-centric, original, and creative that is based on experiences and relationships, AI cannot replace that. So what is it about you that is not replaceable? And you can develop that. And I would say for Hong Kong youth, there's one extra layer is, yes, there's the financial survival, but increasingly going to work at a bank or being a lawyer, they're great professions, don't get me wrong. They're not the only solutions. You don't have to be a doctor and lawyer. You can be a singer, you can be a screenwriter, you can come up with a product that, I don't know, I'm making it up, cleans people's clothes in a millisecond. You can come up with anything because now technology actually allows many things to be possible. Meet people, talk to people, daydream together, and then try to find resources to support your daydreams together. And then try to find someone to fund these dreams. That whole ecosystem and the wisdom to work the ecosystem will make you stand out as someone who can succeed or cannot succeed.
I think to summarize, and also taking opportunities to travel abroad, if possible, to also have internships or even be schooled at different places overseas to just broaden our perspectives and to have that global perspective. So just now, I think I congratulated you on being a mother recently. How has that experience been, and you know, what are some reflections or?
Yeah. I mean, it's a wonderful thing, isn't it? Seeing all our friends, including you guys, being parents, and then wondering, is it ever going to happen? So I actually became a mother for the first time at 40, which obviously is a very late time. And in the US, they actually have a name. They call you geriatric mother because that you're literally in a different medical pool when you're that age. You know, luckily my son's very healthy and I'm very grateful. But for sure, it's very real. When you have children, your life is not your own anymore. And in countries or cities where you really don't have help, whether you hire help or your parents or people who around who can help, it's supposed to be a full-time job. A child is all-consuming, 24 hours. And so then, you know, you actually cannot have a career or even your interests, or frankly, even take a shower and take a bath when I have no help. Like, I don't know when I can take a shower. Maybe when my son's napping, but sometimes he wakes up in the middle of my shower. So you cannot even have your basic needs being fulfilled. So I think I learned a lot. It's very humbling. I also realized that if we truly want a society, if people really mean it, that they want women to participate in the workforce, to contribute to society, there has to be solutions where childcare is affordable and also manageable. And on the flip side, I've also met many very successful male leaders, which I usually am amongst a lot of male leaders. And when I meet involved fathers who take ownership and love being with their children and participate in home, they are actually better leaders in the workplace. And I'm not saying this to convince you all to join me in the women empowerment movement. No, you all go do your research, right? When a man is able to take ownership of their home, support their wives, be close to the kids, learn how to communicate with them, learn how to love them, and manage their work accordingly, they are much more empathetic, they are much more dependable, they're much more appealing, they're much more thoughtful, even in the workplace and in the business world with each other. There's much more humanity actually to these business leaders. So I think it's a win-win situation for both male and women to be involved in home and for people to find a way to give everyone opportunity to have childcare. So I think being a mom, one word is overwhelming. But I think it's good to be overwhelmed sometimes, because only when we're stretched and overwhelmed is when we start thinking creatively about what better things could be done.
Yeah. So Ilaria, as somebody who graduated from Stanford, and Stanford's known for entrepreneurship and innovation, how would you say that education or time at Stanford has shaped you as a person and your leadership?
Yeah, I loved my time at Stanford because I went to high school in the UK and it was wonderful education too. But I think what I found was there was a somewhat aristocratic spirit where, you know, as an ethnic minority and Asian, we're treated slightly differently sometimes versus, you know, the local British. And I didn't really understand that. I mean, in some ways, racial issues are very sensitive, so I don't want to comment too much on it. But I do think everyone yearns to be seen as an equal. And that's why, like, I think by the time I went to California, I was like, wow, this is kind of a very different environment and landscape. And I mentioned to you too, it's no longer about what family you came from, what last name you have. It's just about, did you work hard enough to earn your place here? And if you did, then someone will pay for it to make sure you are respected here and you can finish your studies here. And I think I went to Stanford starting 2001 and I graduated 2005. So Steve Jobs was my commencement speaker, that very famous speech. But at that time, it was actually not that famous because iPhone was not out yet in 2005. He blew up, that whole speech blew up a little bit after my graduation. Many of my friends and my social network there, they're the reason for me to be very inspired. Of course, it was a great education, but what inspired me was actually a very humble environment where everyone we were just wearing shorts and flip-flops every day. We sit out in the grass, we discuss things. There was no pretense of needing to be perceived or look a certain way, but everyone has something very cool to share, and everyone wants to change the world in a good way, and everyone wants to come together to do that. We would help each other with our homework. There was no like, ooh, if you do better, then I'm not doing that well. Everyone just shares and help each other with learning and loving. Maybe it's the sunshine, but I would say the sunshine in California brought out the best in us. And many years after graduation now, many of my classmates wrote the tech boom. They were the original venture capitalists, Facebook, Google people. I do see also many people who, despite their success, they do not brag, they do not spend extravagantly, and much resources are dedicated to helping others, helping whether it's in humanitarian work or in rebuilding communities. And even though you're a tech billionaire, you still go home every Friday at 4 p.m. to help your wife cook dinner, chop lettuce, and change the kid's diaper. And that's kind of my friends and my circle that I see living by a role model and example, how they live their lives, navigating so-called success, but at the same time, just you live life as an everyday human and you try to contribute to the world in the best way possible. And I think that spirit actually is something that is quite infectious at the Stanford community. And of course, many schools I'm sure also have that wonderful ethos as well. But at Stanford, and also the Stanford Graduate School of Business, you really feel like you're in a family that has that humility but drive as well. Yeah.
Beautiful. You're also a woman of great artistic talents, a singer, a pianist, and actress. How do you balance all that you're doing in the work world, the family, with your artistic interests? And how has that helped or shaped you as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I'm afraid since I became a banker at Goldman Sachs, many of those had to take a back seat, but I still would occasionally come out and sing at events or weddings. And I think that being who I am, one of the greatest gifts that I am privileged to think I have is the gift of connecting with people and also purpose-driven storytelling. And I think we all need to find an effective way to express ourselves in a way that is palatable and relevant to the person we're speaking to. And you say it in a winsome way that dignifies your audience, but also gives justice to what you're trying to advocate, instead of trying to promote and sell something which people immediately want to shut you off already, or speaking at people rather than to people. And I think that's how many communications have broken down these days between people over politics, over racial issues, is that we're all just talking at people on something that we pre-rehearsed in our mind that is biased by our own, circumstantial bias. And then we just keep going at each other and nobody wants to listen to each other. But what if we do it the other way around? And that immediately cultivates a bond and understanding. Then that would promote collaboration, business opportunities, life opportunities. Maybe you can co-found things that are synergistic to change the world. I think the difference between communicating well and not communication is huge. It is life and death. It is the definition of something working and something breaking down. So I would say being an artsy-fartsy person helps me speak to people better, and that's actually been a great gift.
And that's very evident, as we can see on this show today. Given your experience and also understanding Hong Kong, mainland, and Asia, what are some advice or pearls of wisdom you want to share with these young women that wants to be in tech and finance?
Yeah, I think actually in a place like Hong Kong, women are already very well supported. Not only affordable domestic help, but I do see a lot of women in leadership. But yet, I still have conversations with successful women who say it is difficult to be the only woman in the boardroom or the only woman in a room of senior executives, because when you are the only person odd one out, even if no one says anything to exclude you, you feel excluded by the private jokes, by the demeanor and the mannerisms that is exhibited in the room. You feel that you're the odd one out. Not to mention, there are many environments where people are deliberately being discriminated upon, deliberately disrespected. I would say, first of all, that men were not your enemies. We are in this together. So women empowerment is not about men disempowerment. It's the other way around. It's actually about helping women be better selves so that men can also be better selves at home in the world. So we're all in this together. It's a all sunshine for everybody situation. The next point I would like to make is if you are someone, especially young, so you're not maybe senior or powerful yet, there are ways to be dignified while you're in this difficult situation where you're feeling like you're disrespected. For example, I was giving a talk in Silicon Valley to actually a lot of young Asians who are from Southeast Asia, who are tech founders. And I actually led a 2-hour session where case by case, I listened to each young woman tell me what they're struggling with. Many are struggling to fundraise for their startups, and many of them experience very humiliating circumstances, in a room where a lot of funders are male. They're just being spoken to in a way that almost discredits their business, makes them feel like, especially if they're trying to solve gender issues, they're not being listened to. And I would say what they decide is their choice, but how you respond is yours. So you can speak in a way that says, I am, instead of feeling very sorry and angry and emotional and you cry and you talk back or anything, be very forthright and say, I'm very sorry you do not see eye to eye with my findings, because obviously I've done all sorts of homework and evidence-based, and all people support my viewpoint, and this is a viable business, but you're entitled to your conclusion. But I am also sorry that you behaved in such an unprofessional manner. That is not emblematic at all of what your firm claims to be in public. And I came here expecting to be dealt with in a way that is respected and dignified, and you have not done that. So I do not think that collaboration is in either of our interests, but you say it in a very respectful way and you leave. I think in that way, you might earn a respect in some ways, but at the same time, you also feel empowered that someone will listen to you at some point and you'll be heard. And when word gets out that you actually are someone who can hold your own in circumstances like that while justifying why your business is viable, someone will fund you and someone will give you a voice and let you in. And the final thing I would say is make friends. So if you're not an insider, if you're an outsider, find someone who's an insider, intentionally form friendships with them, and tell them, can you please help open up your network for me? Can you help open a door to let someone like me in so that more people can be let into the insider circle? If you're a woman that is in a position of power, help other people who do not have power. Whether they're men or women, doesn't matter. But help people who have not made it yet have a way in, instead of protecting your inner circle and kind of feel complacent about having made it, help people who have not made it yet, because you were there once upon a time in that person's space. Put yourself in their shoes, because that will make your company better. That will make your world better if you let in more talented people. That's what I would say actually to the young people, especially young women who feel discouraged.
Thank you. That's most wise and inspiring, and I hope many successful women like yourselves will especially help those that are less fortunate and to offer a lending hand. But as somebody who is so successful in so many realms, and just now you mentioned you recently in this season of being a mother, you feel overwhelmed. I know you're a Christian and faith plays a big role in your life. Could you share a bit how does faith help you in business, in your humanitarian work, as a mother, as a social advocate?
Yeah, I mean, that's such a great question, because that's really the core of who we are. I think faith is transformational for me ever since I became a Christian first year in university, mainly because faith reminds you that someone else is in control, takes away a very melancholic burden. Knowing that we're not in control, but yet knowing that we are loved and treasured, also empowers us to live in a much more free way. I can give without giving to get. I can love without thinking, how can you be useful to me in future? Is it worth spending time with Kevin Lau for an hour, or doing this? It creates a much fuller life. But most importantly is also knowing that we're just very small creatures. Like when you fly on an airplane, you look down. I don't even see human beings because we're so small. We will all die one day. We're very short-lived on this earth. Even looking at a tree, they live far longer than we do. Yet, while we're alive, we think that the world revolves around us. That's the condition of human beings, right? Realizing how small we are, but yet how significant we are, is also important to put things in perspective. I think I am amongst a lot of friends that want to do big things to change the world, which is great. I think we all need to have that ambition, but very oftentimes we cannot change the world. Everything I do there's no results, and I need to be okay about that and have a humble sense of who we are, who I am. Why does everything have to work out because Ilaria is doing it? Very often it doesn't work out. I'm wrong. I'm not capable. I have to admit all of that. And I think faith gives me the power to face that without thinking that I'm a failure. And most importantly is knowing where we'll go after we die. I know this is not a normal topic for, business discussions, but our lives are very finite, even though we all try to use science now to prolong our lives. And, we cannot cheat death. Every time, because I fly so much, every time I'm on a plane, I'm like, please, please, please let this plane not fail and crash and, all of that. I love scuba diving, but one of the reasons why I love scuba diving is that in the ocean, I am the smallest, weakest person. Any fish is more capable of surviving in that environment than me. I need all these tanks and time counts and all of that, and I am in their turf, But in there's a freedom of knowing that you're not in control as well. You're just there. You're like flowing. And I think that helps me flow through life during times that could be very tense and stressful. And at the end of the day, nothing is such a big deal. Like nothing. Even death, which is a big deal, if we know that we all face it, then you kind of have a wisdom about it, and you just help you live your life in a more meaningful way while we're alive. And there's no denial. So I think faith is a relationship with who I think is a God, is a living God. And it is beautiful that someone alive and powerful and is your father has your back all the time, right? And that's how a healthy relationship with our kids, we both have young kids, right? If they come home and they feel safe, all they need to do is to know that we're their parents. Everything else will be taken care of. And I mean, isn't that great if we can all live through our adult lives knowing that, we're taken care of.
Yeah. I think for me, being a parent has actually personally helped me understand, the father's love a lot more. Because I think maybe it's an Asian trait, but I think we sometimes feel we need to earn the love from God. But, both of us are parents, and we know that, our love for our children, it's not because they need to earn it. We naturally, as parents, love our children. And that's exactly how, God loves us. It's not something that needs to be earned, but that by His grace and by His love, it's given to us. I think one thing that, being in your circle, I think sometimes people think that successful business people or executives, senior executives, I think sometimes people think that these people do not need faith and do not need God. Being, high flyers or successful people and successful in many realms. Do you, in your experience with, people that would you say that's really true? Or actually conversely, there are people that a significant number of them do have a faith, and that faith plays an integral role in what they're doing?
I would say that the materialistic world, like we live in an age of unprecedented consumerism. Buying things, watching things, going to do things, eating things. There's more than enough every day to keep us busy, and that's the word, right? You're distracted. It's not necessarily something that's meaningful and value add, but things are there to fill your days without necessarily being significant and value add and transformational to you. Rich people have more money to play with, so you have more things that could distract you. That's it. I don't think rich people are ever more fulfilled because it's all relative, isn't it? Is it having 10 million in the bank or 100 million in the bank? Is it having one C-class Mercedes or having 10 Bentleys that means that you actually have enough? Literally, there's no answer, which is why I bring this up, right? And of course, you don't want to be so poor that you cannot feed yourself or you cannot go to school. That's why I think that if we have resources, we really should help people who cannot even have those basic needs met. But once the basic needs are met, actually it's greed, and it's just wanting to, it's an insatiable desire to have more. I think to your question, right? I used to think too that before I met some of these, I guess, top tier level celebrities, I would think they must have a different way of life. But actually, the answer really is no, because I'll give you an example. I think a number of years ago, I was speaking at a conference in Hangzhou for one of the investment banks, and sitting next to me was the Princess of Netherlands and Spain by descent, and she's married to one of the richest billionaires in Europe. But the whole time when she was sitting next to me, she did not tell me who she was. She just told me her first name. And it wasn't until the end of the conference and they called out the keynote speaker and they say, oh, it's Her Royal Highness, blah, 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 blah. She went up and I said, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. And she said, who cares? Like, now we're friends. And she told me after that conference, she has to go back home to her young kids. And, they're looking at she and her husband were looking at train times because that was the fastest. And when they're home, they're very normal people. It's not what we think a lot of the royals are. So that really appealed to me, because then I understood why they actually live a very fulfilling life, because both of them are philanthropic. They both are very in tune with the real world. They're not people who do not know what's going on, which then allows them to be very effective business and philanthropy leaders. And that's a healthy example, right? I've one time met the ex-Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, and the whole time at dinner, he was telling me that he's a farmer, which is true. He was a farmer, but he's a large farmer. It's only later when he told me about his political career, but he doesn't identify with being a one-time very famous politician. His everyday life is raising cows. So he was teaching me how to raise the Wagyu type of cows versus normal cows. How do you feed them? How do you treat them? And that is also his life. And I think unhealthy examples, of course, there are many. And I think that many rich people or powerful people, if that's all they are about, then lives are very lonely when every moment you just want to be in the spotlight, when you're thinking about what newspapers are writing about you, when you're thinking about how to use people, because that's really how, you advance in your ways, right? How do you get people to do what you want them to do so that you can be the spotlight of everything? It's never about others, it's always about you. Nobody can be happy that way, and nobody can have a meaningful, true relationships that way. And I think we all see examples of that, and we don't need to mention the names. But I would like to mention the two examples I did mention, because when you meet very powerful or seemingly, untouchable celebrities who actually live a normal person's life with the best values, that is actually the highest form of success that they enjoy. And I think we should not feel that, we should not feel that we have to envy powerful people because they want to live like normal people if they are wise.
Yeah. Thank you. One of your missions, Ilaria, is to foster bridges between the East and the West, and to really benefit the masses. At a time of where we are in the world right now, where do you see efforts in this, or what are some key initiatives that you think, people who also want to do this, what are some key areas we should be focusing on right now?
Yeah, I mean, I wish there is a one-size-fits-all answer, but I would say when institutions and governments, like the big macro things, when things are sensitive that way, and when there's tension that way, we should then go underground, and we should then work with everyday grassroots in order to do the opposite, right? I actually think deep down, even leaders who are engaged in tension-filled activities and discussions, maybe deep down they don't want to be in that position. I don't think any one of us want to be blown up by a nuclear weapon at all. But yet, when you're placed in a situation, in Chinese we say 三不有己, right? You then have to be engaged in, tit for tat. I'm guessing you guessing me. But I think as normal civilians, when we're engaged in business and humanitarian work, in arts, in all kinds of different sector activities that do not have to touch on those sensitive areas, we should be making an effort to bridge people from different race, different backgrounds, different socioeconomic status, different religion, and create more platforms, informal platforms for people to come together and allow people to just see people as people. So for example, I often bring people from Silicon Valley and the West to travel to Asia with me so that they can meet local friends that I know that they normally wouldn't if they were trying to come through a company or trying to come through a government agency or an effort, because immediately that becomes much more of a business transactional meeting and people then will say, you know, scripted things. So and once you travel with someone, you go beyond being just a superficial contact. You actually hopefully become friends because you see what they do when they're, you know, about to fall asleep, when they're jet lagged, when they're calling their wives, when they're hungry, when they're stressed out, right? And you just see each other as people rather than, you know, you're Chinese, I'm American, you're white, I'm black. Like, it's not like that. And I would encourage everyone in different sectors to find your creative ways to create human interactions, real life human interactions, so that people can put down their differences in that way. And I think many topics in this world do not have to be sensitive. We all want to advance our lives, education for our kids, fulfillment, food, you know, music, learning about each other's history, creating business solutions that fulfill all the Maslow hierarchies for everybody. You know, we're all human beings. We're all very similar what we want, and help each other realize each other as better versions of ourselves.
Yeah. I think both you and I grew up in an era of I think I'd say globalization,
yeah,
and I think we're beneficiaries of that era. But more recently, I'd say that a lot of governments or the sentiments have been moving away from that pillar, which is sad in my opinion. But because of that, I've also seen that globally, people of ethnic Chinese origin, their identity in relating to or identifying with being a Chinese, be it in any country in the world, seems to have heightened under such a generation right now. Is that something you've also noticed, or how do we explain that?
Yeah, I do think that, yes, it's true. And I've lived in California for the past 3 years now, and it's definitely something that's not happened to this level before. And of course, I do think public propaganda or what leaders say matter, and it will affect people, especially during times of difficulty. During COVID, when now there's economic downturn, it's very easy to speak into the negative emotions that people are experiencing in order for certain people to advance their agenda. And unfortunately, I do think that the casualty is often the Chinese or even Asians. It's not even just Chinese, any Asian that are in a setting that is not Asia. That is absolutely true. I do still know many people who are not racist, Caucasians in the States who embrace and love, you know, Asian people as well. And they're very heartbroken by what's going on. And it's not just racist against Asia, it's against other races as well. So every race struggles with your own version of discrimination, to be honest. And I'm sure white men also struggle with being discriminated upon in a different kind of way right now. So it just doesn't end. This is a human condition. But what I will say is that for the first time in centuries or ever, I do think Chinese people may be also perceived as a threat, maybe as people who are very capable, but possibly taking away people's jobs rather than you're just an ethnic minority here. So that creates a different kind of tension when you think my place in school or my job may be threatened by you. And now the narrative is, yes, China being the second largest economy in the world, does it threaten the US? And what does it mean with the power, balance of power? So that is very real, and let's not deny it, right? So it's hard because people like you and I, especially me, I speak with an American accent. I'm not an American citizen, but I am a permanent resident there, but I'm also from Hong Kong. I'm also a product of both sides. So I don't feel like I ever should be forced to take sides. But I'm sure at some point someone will ask me, are you an American or are you a Chinese? And many people get asked that. So that's something that can't change. And all I would say to people who are frustrated about this dynamics is that, yeah, like be smart about who you surround yourselves with. Be smart about what you say, especially in public settings, but also be smart with like forming your allies and countering that. You know, if someone is seeing you as a threat, like show them how you're not a threat. Show them how you are a value add, a contributor, a friend, and a good neighbor by action, not just by words. And I think at the end of the day, we are again just people. We want to be seen as people. We want to be treated as fellow human beings rather than labeled and caricatured. But it all starts with us. Yeah.
I think I do think in a time where it's very polarized, if we could focus more on, you know, things that are more apartisan, like climate, healthcare, humanitarian.
Yeah.
Those are areas I think that there's still a lot of opportunities. But you know, at this time, how do we encourage that? Instead of, I do feel there's still a lot of fear in people because of the tensions. But how do we encourage people to focus that yes, there are tensions, but you know, China has a lot that it's done good for the region and globally. Of course, I understand that, you know, just now there's mention of certain, you know, countries where they perceive China as a threat to even very common things that, you know, for example, in UK, somebody might be worried about Chinese, you know, being a threat to their spot in school. But
Yeah.
how do we encourage people to focus on all the positives that, you know, China has done, and regionally and globally at a time like this?
Honestly, I think we should, as Chinese people, for example, we should work on being more fun. I'm probably stepping on toes saying this, but I think we're like very hardworking. We're model citizens. You're always trying to do the right thing, but maybe we're not fun enough. Maybe we're not outspoken enough. We're not expressive enough. Very often I will talk to people and say, you know, I'm on these conference, right? And sometimes once in a blue moon, there'll be a Chinese or Asian there, but a lot of them are, you know, from other races. And Americans are great at promoting themselves. They're great at putting on a great show. I'm not saying it's fake, it's real.
Yes.
They are really great at articulating and bringing to life what they're good at. And they're great at speaking and selling and engaging. And sometimes I would say, like, our people, like, we don't do enough of that. We're very quiet. We rather under communicate what we're doing. We are, you know, when we're at a dinner table, we probably aren't the people who start a conversation first and get everyone involved. So I love doing that at dinner tables, just instigate, ask very personal questions, look them in the eye, and at first they'll feel weird, and afterwards then everyone kind of lightens up, and then you end up engaging, and they'll ask me, like, you know, you're not very Asian, the way you behave. And I said, yes. And in that sense, I'm not. But, you know, there are many great things about Asians too that you guys should find out after starting to talk to us. It's only when you don't talk to Asians, then you presume things about them. So I would encourage fellow Asians who are usually more conservative, quiet, and holding to themselves, like, get out there, be fun. Talk to someone as if you're talking to your best friend at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night over a glass of wine at home with your shoes off. Try to do that when you're in a setting so that other people can understand you and appreciate the great things that you're doing. And I think that's something we should learn from the Westerners, actually. How do we communicate? And I'm sure they have a lot of things to learn from us too, and hence we should all be bridging each other rather than isolating ourselves from each other.
Yeah. I guess on the topic of bridging, apart from looking at it of different people of different countries, is also wanted to get your thoughts on the position of Hong Kong. Hong Kong, I think you've grown up in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong's known to be a very international metropolitan. And we have a great mix of people, great restaurants, great food. You know, how do you see Hong Kong play that role of bridging the East and West?
Yeah. You know, that's such a dear topic to my heart because I did work here for 2 years after university before I moved to New York. And even when I was in New York, I was in charge of helping take Chinese companies public and bring US and global investors into Asia. So it's always working with Asian management, Asian companies, and helping Western investors participate in investing into Asia. But I do think right now Hong Kong has changed. We are now a conduit into China. And that identity obviously took a few difficult years for everyone to digest and understand. But I do think as a Hong Konger, we should be proud of being Chinese while we appreciate the best that the West has given us and taught us. But the key is not to be in denial or disillusioned by either. So for example, I don't think we should hate the fact that we're part of China so much that we have to, cut ties and friendships with all our Hong Kong China friends and leave and move and, deny that part of our identity. I think that's very extreme. At the same time, I also don't think we should say the West is the enemy because not the whole West is the only enemy. It's only certain bad players, frankly, if something unfair is going on. Let's separate the people from a lot of the jobs and the political narrative, right? I think right now, if we have a good sense of what Hong Kong's future identity is, which is a conduit into China, then we should elevate and leverage that position without confusing our role. So for example, if we're a conduit into China, we should help the world understand China better, which I love that this show wants to share stories to the world in English with people like you and I who have international globalization backgrounds to talk about Asia in a way that's very personal, but also very unbiased. Why don't we do that? Why don't we bring a lot of cultural myths and things that maybe foreigners find difficult to understand? Why don't we talk about it openly? Why don't we create more forums and discussion places and fun activities and invite people in here to see what our lives are all about? And why don't we collaborate? Again, on neutral things. Why don't we go and do projects around the world to help other people around the world have better lives together? And Hong Kong being that convener of power and influence, but also of aspirations and hope, right? I think we first of all is to recap, understand who we are first. It's only when we know who we are in the mission, then we can define the vision and the actionable plan and the ideas of how to execute it. Yeah.
No, I think that's very wise and I think very inspirational for a lot of our Hong Kong viewers, viewers in Asia to understand. I think the identity and the roots, as you mentioned. I think for us to know where we are from, where we are at, in order for us to know where we're going in the future.
Yeah.
And I think that it really requires a lot of self-reflection.
Yes.
So I think that's very evident in what we all need to do a bit more of. Thank you so much, Ilaria, for today. It was such an inspiration to be able to speak on so many realms, from work, humanitarian work, a mother, on East and West. And also we hope to be able to invite you back again soon and to share more.
Thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure. Thanks, Kevin.
Thank you, Ilaria.